President Trump's Environmental Protection Agency is vowing to pull back $20 billion of your money, taxpayer money, that was designated for climate projects by President Biden. Now, those climate grants were one of Biden's final acts in office, but EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin says it was, quote, a rush job to avoid congressional oversight. Fox Business's Grady Trimble is live in Washington with more. Grady.
Hey, Kaylee, the current EPA says the previous administration parked about $20 billion in an outside financial institution with a goal of doling that money out to climate organizations. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin says the agreement with that bank must be immediately terminated and all of that money must be returned.
We're not talking about chump change here. We're talking about billions of your tax dollars. We at the EPA and inside the Trump administration have zero tolerance for waste and abuse. We're coming down hard on this.
And there's more. Zeldin has already canceled a $50 million grant for an organization called the Climate Justice Alliance for its pro-Palestinian stance. The head of that organization is blaming the Biden administration for not processing that money, and it's lashing out at the Trump administration, saying despite claims that this administration will protect clean water and clean air for the nation, it has attacked basic protections for neglected communities from day one. That's what they're saying. Here's what RNC Chair Michael Whatley is saying.
Look, the people who are screaming the most right now are the people who are affected by these cuts. These are all people who have been entitled to this money. They've been receiving this money. The fact is that the taxpayers, the voters of America, have said no more.
And Kaylee, just to put things into perspective, that $20 billion we talked about at the top, if you look at the median income in the United States, $20 billion is equivalent to the annual salaries of roughly 500,000 Americans. So as Zeldin said, it is not chump change. It's a lot of money and a lot of salaries going to the government. Kaylee?
It's a good way to look at it in terms of salaries. Grady, thank you. Paul, it's interesting. So this money is shoved to 8 entities that then dole this out to NGOs. If you're following here, it's kind of feels like a shell game. We put it here and there, and you can see where accountability is a huge problem.
Yeah, and, you know, the beneficiaries of all of this are always people who are right in line with their fellow travelers. I looked at one of these very clearly. I'm going to do something I don't do very often. I'm going to plug my Substack. Opsdesk.org takes you to it. Here's why. Just did a big deep dive on one of the entities involved here. Everybody running the thing is Obama adjacent. All right. His hand is still in this thing. They got $15 billion from what I can ascertain. Climate United. All of it is that they had $500,000 a year ago. In a year's time, the Biden administration managed to get them $15 billion with a B dollars. Think about what you could do with that for real teachers that actually teach real writing and real math. How many cops, firemen, nurses, doctors, et cetera? Instead, it goes to some climate fund. Here's what I'd like to see, because let's just advance the story. A grand jury. Not every grand jury has to be criminal. Let's do a grand jury to issue a report. That way, the grand jury minutes are not secret. A grand jury report, put it out like the 9/11 report. Who are these people? How did they get all of our money? I want to see it, push it out to the public. Donald Trump will once again, as we said in the A block, retain the high ground.
Harris, there was a ton of reporting about the Biden administration shoving this money out the door on their way out, shoving it to dark corners. And I think that there should be some sort of rule, maybe legislation, that when you're on the way out the door, maybe we press pause on the spending. The American people clearly had different priorities than Biden at that time in history.
Yeah, well, he set the bar on that, it would seem, because now you're starting to see, like, the AG Pam Bondi clawing back some of those dollars. You see the head of FEMA, Kristi Noem, clawing back the $59 million or more that they had just given New York, because the money was already in the pipeline, but we're not quite so sure that it should have been doled out, you know. And so now we're starting to see, well, what does it look like if they're able to push some stuff out on the way out the door through contracts or whatever? What does it look like for a president who's promised the people that he's going to claw that back? Well, apparently, it looks like he's going to be successful in many cases, and that's a good thing. The other thing I would say, Jim Justice, who is the senior senator in the great state of West Virginia, told me last week that if you look at all of this, there's an opportunity now for each state to come behind the DOGE cuts. He knows that some people in his state may lose their jobs through this whole thing. He said, now is our moment to shine. He wants to create more jobs and energy because he can now. Under Biden, he couldn't. Under Obama, remember, they were going after coal. They were doing all the things to push ahead. And if there's going to be some transition between now and whatever comes in the future, we're going to need all hands on deck in energy. And he said so for his state. He's looking forward to what DOGE is doing because it's going to get West Virginia back to what really makes them money.
Yeah, we know that fracking is a big part of that in that corner of the country. But Emily, one of the loudest reporters in the briefing room, most hostile, was a guy named John Carl when I was there. And I want to play a clip from him. I'm sure he loved reporting on the great successes of the Trump administration. There's one point in particular on climate I want you to listen to.
Donald Trump's favorability rating is actually higher than it ever was the first time around. Let me ask you, a recent poll by Marquette looked at several of the things that he has done or says that he is going to do, and 63% favor federal government's recognition of only two sexes, 60% favor deporting immigrants who entered the United States illegally, 60% favor expanding oil and gas production, 59% favor declaring an emergency at the southern border. Is there anything you are seeing that Trump is doing that you are in favor of, that you think is the right thing?
Let me say, as it relates to all of those issues, we're just at the beginning.
Yeah, we're at the beginning, and 60% want oil and gas drilling. So I'm sure they love to hear $20 billion went to climate initiatives.
Exactly. And I also feel like that divulges how absent the Democrat Party, the elected officials of the Democrat Party are with the actual voters and with Americans. They're just at the beginning, while Americans have been here for quite some time. I think being quite loud about wanting jobs, wanting drilling, wanting things that make the economy thrive. And I want to point out, too, with that media clip, the shaping of the narrative here. So recall that how the AP phrased this. They said, Biden issued $20 billion in green grants. The Trump administration now wants it back. Right? It's all about the framing, whereas the EPA and Secretary Zeldin says, or the Administrator Zeldin says, well, it was a rush job. And we know the use or lose rush that happens at the end of every government fiscal year. The reality is that there is a rush. There's a hiding. There's a lot of actions here that I think are totally obfuscated when under the headlines, well, it was delegated. It wasn't. There was not a grant thoughtful process. It was a shoving a big amount of your money into a sort of hidey hole and then waiting for that to go out. And then to your point, we're going to learn what grants, what recipients are. And the next point that I wanted to make, which I just lost, was this. No, I just lost it again.
It's President's Day. It's a federal holiday, so you're allowed to lose points.
What was I going to say? It was important at the time.
Big rain. It'll come back. It'll come back to you.
How embarrassing.
Kennedy.
I will cede my time whenever it reoccurs, Emily, because I believe in her.
My genius.
I also believe in this thrust of winnowing down the federal government, one administration, one department at a time. And I would like to see more departments go in and doge themselves before, the larger operation comes in, because I think there are a lot of very suspect branches that need to be pruned, that are costing people a lot of money. And there are very few examples here where people go, oh, what a wonderful return on investment for my tax dollars. Yep. Like, I have so much being taken away from me in taxation. Like, these programs really help me personally. They don't. None of this stuff that we have seen, it's just making people go, this is what the federal government is spending my money on? You have to be kidding me. So if we're finding just $20 billion at the EPA, Elon Musk has promised that DOGE will get rid of $1 trillion in wasteful spending. Yeah, I think we're going to get there sooner than anyone could have imagined. I think there's so much waste here. And, to your point, when you're talking about some of the NGOs, the more times you shift the money, the less transparency there is. Mm-hmm. And so that is the point of the entire operation, is to get it, say you're doing something that's meaningful and beneficial, and get it the hell out of there so it can be laundered a few more times, so no one really knows where the money's going. We just know there are administrators in these NGOs who are making, very tidy 6 and 7 figure salaries.
So swampy.
Yes. Yeah. I love what you said, to doge themselves. You've made doge a verb. I like it. Maybe that can be the word of the year. Yeah, word of the year. Doge yourself, guys.